Okay, so like all projects, I start at the miter saw typically. These are rough cut or old 2x12s and a bunch of slats. I also had some old leftover poplar, so this project will consist of the frame and drawers will be cut off scrap pine that I have from previous projects and some poplar for the top and bottom shelves that were left over from other projects also. So the only thing I had to buy for this project were drawer slides, and the client wanted just like regular clothes slides. Sometimes they said like the soft clothes, unless you get real expensive ones, are a little finicky. So I start the miter saw, then I'm going to go to the table saw, and that's going to be a lot of this to start because most of this wood is somewhat square. I will run some through the joiner and planer in a little bit, but right now a lot of it's going to be the miter saw and table saw just to get everything to rough measurements, breaking it down. Okay, so these would be the legs. Roughly, we're going to know these up more, obviously. So the dimensions on these two tables are going to be 20 by 20 by 24. So, and it will have, like I said, drawers. So I'm going to be using the pine for the frame pieces, all cut-offs and scraps from other projects, like I said. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm still milling this all up. We're just cutting down the rough measurements right now, like I mentioned. So this is a lot of like repetitive steps, and there's a lot of wood for this because you got to because what I'm gonna have a bunch of stretchers and apron pieces that are gonna be like 1 inch in diameter. That I'm gonna have like the wider pieces for the main frame for the top, besides where the drawer boxes are. So we're gonna have an open in there. So it's a little more extra wood pieces because I like to have three on each side, besides the front where it'll be two pieces. And you'll see later as I start assembling it how it's going to look. But I try to keep it as basic as possible, but sturdy and nice. I mean, it's going to be rustic farmhouse furniture, but it's not going to be junky. I'm going to make this look like good furniture and functional furniture. So now we're really going to start milling this wood up with a planer and joiner. Mainly the planer because it's pretty straight. Especially this 5/4, but we're going to go through the planer now to get down the final thickness. So I am going to be using pocket screws for this joinery. I was thinking about using dowels, but I'm kind of on a time crunch to a certain extent, so I had to decide to go with pocket holes, and it's a little faster, but it's also a strong joinery with glue and right clamp pressure. So everything also runs through the router table here. I just put a chamfer on each edge, give it a nice little look, and a nice sanding. So here's where I do the assembly. So it will be pocket screws, like I said, glue, clamps, and I'm also using spacers for my reveal and also spacers for the drawer opening. So that has to match the side pieces. So I'm using the side pieces as spacers to make sure everything lines up perfectly and right clamping pressure, and just really kind of take my time here and just get everything nice and square and make sure the spacers are good. You want to have a nice reveal, gives a nice look. So everything's looking good, and that's the next step. We're going to assemble this. So I will speed this up here so I don't bore everybody, but it's pretty repetitive steps, and this is the spacer I'm going to be using for my opening. So I know that everything matches up all four sides. So another little piece of advice when I build furniture, especially, or any kind of projects, is to have your spacers ahead of time, have your jigs and templates laid out first. Now I do build custom furniture, so I don't build really the same thing twice a lot of times. Sometimes I do, but I have furniture that's all different dimensions, different sizes, different requests, and that's what I kind of specialize in, these small little tables. But it's good to have that kind of stuff, the jigs and the templates, just to help you speed up the process. You can streamline things because time is money, and it also helps you be consistent. So that's what I'm doing here. As you see, I'll be having wood blocks laying out, speed squares and things like that, just to make sure everything is square and equal, and the same. These tables need to be identical, so it's important that everything lines up perfectly. Okay, so here now I'm just going to button up some things. So I'm putting little cleats on the bottom to hold the bottom shelves in. I'm using this little, as you can see, a little template spacer block here. That'll be the thickness of the bottom shelf pieces. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just using some 18 gauge brad nails. I think these are like 1-inch brads going in. And I just put them on each side of both tables. And I'm also going to, you'll see, I'm going to be using this little 1/4-inch ply, and this is going to be a little spacer for the drawers inside the box here, just so it's flush with the legs and the frame. So there's a little gap there, like a 1/4-inch gap. So I'm just going to throw a couple brads in here also, just so this is where the drawers will mount. The drawer slides, I'm sorry, will mount. Okay, so next, to me, it's probably the most stressful part because this, you have to be perfect here because you want your drawers to go in nice. So I'm going to be putting the drawer slides in here, and I just used the little Craig jig, which works pretty good. It's not my favorite thing. I'm going to look into other things, and I'm using a little 12-volt impact driver here to screw in the slides. I don't want to over torque them, these little screws. Sometimes you can even hand screw them in. So I'm also using a level, as you can see here, to make sure the slides stay level as I mount and screw them in. And that's what I'm doing here. So I haven't even built the boxes yet, which will be the next step. So I just want to get these in so I have an idea of the exact measurement of the box. I know it's 1 inch if you measure, but sometimes I just want to be exact with this. Sometimes it's a little off after you mill everything up. So this is what I'm doing now. I'm just going to put these drawer slides in while I have these boxes accessible, and then we'll start building the drawer boxes next. So now I'm on to the drawer boxes. I'm going to start cutting these up, and the table saw and the miter saw, and I'm just going to be cutting them. They're going to be 5 inches in height, all 4 sides. Well, the back will be a little shorter, as you'll see when I start assembling this. And I'm just going to put in a 1/4-inch groove on the bottom of each side to slide the bottom of the drawer box in. So that's where we're at now. So you'll see as I start setting this up. So here's where I'm going to be cutting a little slot in the bottom of each drawer piece, and this is to slide the bottom of the drawer in. And I'm just going to be using 2 passes on each one because I don't have a dado set, and 2 passes comes out to about 1/4 inches with the curve. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just going to cut this little slot in about 1/4 inch off the bottom, and they're going to be 1/4 inch in it's going to be a 1/4 inch dado essentially. So you can see here I'm expecting each piece, and I'm doing this because I'm going to make sure that I'm cutting the dado on the nicer side of the wood, because that's the part that essentially going to be exposed to the client when they open up the drawer. That's all I'm doing here. So here I'm just using some like backer board for the bottom of these drawers boxes. So I'm cutting that out now to the correct dimensions. Most part of this project is being used from cutoffs and scraps from other projects, and that's why I'm using this. I typically would use a 1/4 inch ply, but this is pretty sturdy too. It works well. So here's where I'm going to be doing the install of the drawers. Just use some glue, some brad nails, and if you look on the table here, the workspace, I have a little square set up, and I'm just using that as my it's kind of like my corner bracket piece to make sure everything's nice and square when I build these drawers. So you'll see as I'll lay it in here. It's a nice little tip. A lot of people do things like this to make sure everything's nice and square as you build. And if you look on the bottom of these, you'll see the little bracket or the little dado, and that's where the bottom will slide in. So we'll build the 3 sides, slide the bottom in, then we'll cut the back to slide in over top of the bottom. So here I'm just going to cut the dado piece off the back. This is the back of the drawer. We don't need this for each drawer, so we're just going to cut this off, and this will go on top of the bottom of the back, and we'll just brad nail and glue in as we're doing here. So here I have the drawer box upside down, and I'm just going to put the back in now with some glue and brad nails, and then we will slide the bottom piece in, and then put a couple little pin nails in just to hold that in place with a little bit of glue also, not too much, but we'll put a little glue in the dados. Voila, drawer box is done. Okay, so now I have the biscuit joiner out. I'm just gonna put some slots in for the Z-clips for later, for the tabletop install later in the video. So here now I'm just using a flat surface to install the rest of the drawer slides on the drawer box themselves. So I just have a nice flat surface that's even, and I just laid the slides directly flat on the surface and just screw them in from the front to the back of the drawer box. So this is, it's important to do this. Sometimes you can measure up, an inch, half inch, but it becomes difficult. As long as you put the drawer slides in with the correct spacing, like we did earlier in the video with the Craig jig, we know this will work. So that's this step here. We're going to slide these on. I'm using a smaller impact driver, and there we are, nice and straight. Okay, so now I'm going to start milling up the drawer box front face. So this is what we're doing here. We're just going to use some old wood from. I think this is 2 inch, and we're just going to mill it up. Putting a chamfer on each edge. I did run through the planer earlier in the video when I was setting up everything else, but just the whole piece I ran through. So now we're just milling it up, and we're going to use some double-sided tape here to help install this front. I like to put that on there, and I use cards for my spacer, as you'll see. And just really take my time here. This is kind of an important part, because if you don't do this right, you'll have incorrect gaps in the drawer, and sometimes it will get stuck or it'll rub. So you want to make sure you're taking your time here and you're getting your correct spacing, and they have to be consistent for both boxes. So here I'm just using a jig I bought a while back to find my center point for my knob. And this is also going to help me hold the drawer box in. Sorry for the camera angle here. I have my chest on, and I guess it just wasn't set right. So I'm just using a center punch to find my center point, and I'm just double checking, making sure that it's definitely centered. I have the fancier jigs for this, but I just don't like using them. I like this simple jig. So now I'm going to use some little screws and countersink to mount the drawer face on. So that's what we're doing here. So here I'm installing the knob, and this is the other part that I forgot to mention. I did buy these knobs at a box store earlier in the week for this, and I just I used the impact driver to screw it in, but then I also just hand tighten it with a manual screwdriver. So now here, as you see, this is the top. So we'll start milling up the top and bottom pieces, and this is some old poplar I had from other projects. So we got a lot of milling up here. See, I'm also sanding these drawers. You bounce around here a little bit, but this is really how projects are. Every free second of something gluing up, or something, waiting to do something else, I jump onto another step. So here I'm breaking the bottom feet. I used to use a router for this, but this pine is pretty soft, so the 60 grit sandpaper works pretty well. So we're going to go back to the top and bottom pieces here, and like I said, this poplar is pretty straight, but it's not great, so we definitely have to get everything nice and square. So here, after I got everything nice and straight, each piece, so now we're going to laminate the top, and we're just using some glue and clamps. And even pressure. We're going to also use some cauls here, just to make sure everything stays nice and straight and doesn't bow. And not too. And the thing with this too, you also don't want to over clamp, because that sometimes could put a bow in your projects. So that's what we're doing here. We're just, like I said, we're throwing some cauls on each side, just to make sure everything stays nice and straight. Okay, so after a few hours of letting the glue dry, we're going to take the clamps off, and now we're going to start cleaning up these tops and bottom pieces. with a lot of sand and things. You'll see that's going to be probably the next step coming up here. After we cut the final dimension here on the table saw, these are going to be, like I said, 20 by 20 top. So they're going to be nice and square here. So I'm also going to be using some epoxy to fill some of these little gouges and some knots. This is the bottom of the one tabletop, so it's not a real big deal, but it's noticeable, especially on the edge here. So we're going to fill this with some epoxy. We're going to be using some Total Boat, and going to be using resin and the hardener mix, the one mix. Actually, this is the one-to-one mix, and we're also going to use some, I think it's called eye candy, a black dye. As you'll see, just to give it a little black pop to it, and just makes it look a little nicer when you mix the stuff up. So I'm going to lay this epoxy in, and I'm going to heat it with a heat gun here and let it sit for at least 24 hours, unfortunately. Even though the weather's really nice right now for the most part, it was cold, but it definitely warmed up. It's still just going to take a while for this to set. So these tabletops are going to kind of be out of commission for at least a day or so while this cures overnight. Okay, so it's the next morning, so I'm going to clean up some of these glue with a scraper, and everything's dry. So now we're going to start really sanding these down. I start with a belt sander, orbital sander, about 80 grit, go to about 120 grit, and eventually we'll go to about 200 grit. I'm also using a block plane here just to get this epoxy. It's on there pretty thick. Okay, so also we're going to be putting a chamfer on each edge of the tops of the tabletops, and that's what we're doing here. So now we're getting ready to start finishing the top. I could put a little mineral oil on, or some other type of linseed oil, depending on what I have, and just to give it a darken the color, and also helps seal everything up before we start putting the finish on. So that's what we're doing here. We're just putting some mineral oil on, and so now these tables are going to be stained. They want everything bright, and they want the top, bottom shelves, and the knobs to stay natural. So now we're going to mount the top, and here, this is what, if you saw earlier, if you remember, this is where we used the biscuit joint to put the slots in. So we're just spacing at the top with a combination squares, and we're going to be using Z-clips to mount the top. As you see here, there they are. So we just put these Z-clips in. They're about 1/4 inch spaced out, and I put them on each edge, and this prevents wood splitting over time with a seasonal change in wood. So to mount these tops, I typically use a self-centering drill bit here, just to get my just to start the hole. Even though these screws are self-tapping, I like to do that. I like to, especially for harder woods, even though poplar is fairly soft, but still considered a hardwood. I don't want anything splitting, so we're just going to screw these in now after we countersink everything. Here I'm just going to mount the bottoms. I'm just using a brad nauer for this. This wood's fairly thin on the bottom of these shelves. Sometimes screwing them in can sometimes split it. So this is just the fastest way, and also it's a good way to do this. So now we're just going to really start cleaning everything up with another sanding of the drawer boxes and everything, and just button up the handles, put the handles back on after we stained everything. And this project's almost done here, so we're kind of finishing up. We're gonna put some finish on the tops, but they're coming out pretty nice. Okay, so this project's pretty much done. I'm going to be delivering these to a client, and so the only thing I have left to do is I'm going to put a little polyurethane on. They decided they wanted more of a satin look, so I put a couple coats of polyurethane with a little light sanding in between, with a little foam sander, and they wanted to be something they could refinish over time. So Osmo was a little not as good as an option for them. So this project's done. It came out very nice. Minimal cost, really just labor, and the client loved them, which made me happy, and wasn't a lot of overhead, just my time really. And hopefully you like, and thanks for watching.